Breaking news from the Australian Open. Alexandra Eala has just won her match in a stunning upset, becoming the first qualifier to reach the quarterfinals in the tournament's history.
Welcome back to our broadcast, ladies and gentlemen. Today, we are not here to break down the mechanics of a tennis match. We aren't analyzing a trophy, presentation, a crucial breakpoint, or a blistering forehand winner. Instead, we are unpacking a seismic, unforeseen, and frankly bizarre shift in the geopolitical landscape of professional sports that exploded onto the outside courts of Melbourne Park this very week. It began quietly, then erupted into the public consciousness. If you look at the official scoreboard for the 2026 Australian Open, you will see a straightforward, mundane fact. Alexandra Eala, the 20-year-old rising prodigy from the Philippines, was eliminated in the opening round of the competition. She lost. The American player Alycia Parks bested her in a hard-fought three-set battle. On paper, Eala simply failed to survive the harsh binary world of wins and losses. She packed her kit bags. She booked a commercial flight back to Manila. By all conventional tennis standards, her tournament was a non-event that should have been forgotten by morning. However, the reality is that we no longer live in a traditional world. We exist within the ruthless economy of attention. And by that specific metric, the only one that truly dictates a modern superstar's destiny, the scoreboard, was irrelevant. Alexandra Eala didn't just play at the Australian Open. She consumed the narrative entirely. She swallowed the spotlight whole. You need to look at exactly one statistic to understand this. There is one solitary figure that has left tournament directors, corporate sponsors, and veteran commentators scratching their heads in absolute confusion. Before the tournament began, the Australian Open posted press conferences featuring the sport's biggest personalities to their official YouTube channels. We are talking about the absolute icons of the game. We are talking about Novak Djokovic. We are talking about the phenom Carlos Alcaraz. Naturally, we are also talking about Aryna Sabalenka, the world number 2, the defending champion and the most dominant force in women's tennis right now. For her pre-match interview, Sabalenka's press conference video racked up a respectable 8,000 views within its first 24 hours. Now, let's examine the press conference for Alexandra Eala, a player who at that moment had never even contested a main draw match at the Australian Open. Here was a player not even listed among the top seeds, yet 171,000 people watched her video. Let that sink in. 8,000 versus 171,000. That is not a margin of error. That is not a slight advantage. That is a difference of more than 2,000%. That is a statistical abnormality so massive that it doesn't just bend the graph, it shatters it into pieces. After reviewing these numbers, Ben Rothenberg, one of the most reputable journalists in the sport, asked a question that would have sounded completely absurd just 2 years ago. Is Alexandra Eala actually the most popular female tennis player on Earth right now? Just consider how ridiculous that question sounds on the surface. She has never won a Grand Slam title. She hasn't even broken into the top 10 world rankings. Nevertheless, in the digital sphere, the arena that determines Nike contracts massive sponsorship deals and television ratings, she is already eclipsing the reigning queens of the sport. Something fundamentally broke in Melbourne this week. The old system, which dictates that fame is a reward for success, collapsed because when Eala walked onto court 6, it wasn't a tennis match. It was a pilgrimage. It bordered on a riot. It was a coronation of culture. And to be blunt, it was a massive logistical error by the organizers. They treated her like a generic qualifier. They scheduled her on court 6, a tiny outdoor court designed for private, quiet matches with minimal spectators. They were attempting to fit a tsunami into a bathtub without realizing the wave was coming. Melbourne Park was suddenly flooded with thousands of Filipino fans. These weren't just polite seat fillers. They were scaling the barriers and stacking 10 rows deep just to see the court. They packed the standing room areas to capacity. They produced a cacophony of noise, usually associated with a FIFA World Cup final, not a tennis match. This was not a standard Tuesday afternoon in the first round. Within that cauldron of noise, we witnessed something entirely unprecedented in this sport. We watched the emergence of a brand new superpower in tennis. Typically, we look to the United States or Western Europe to find the next big thing. We are always searching for the next Swiatek, the next Sharapova, or the next Serena Williams. But the industry has been looking in the wrong hemisphere. The West is not home to the sleeping giant of global sports enthusiasm. That giant lives in Southeast Asia. And folks, it just woke up. The entire globe was stunned, but you better believe it is real. Because while Aryna Sabalenka is busy winning matches, Alexandra Eala is busy winning the world. We are going deep into this story today. We are dissecting the analytics. We will examine the siege of Court 6. We are going to discuss the heated controversy erupting online regarding crowd etiquette. And we will pose the final ultimate question. Is this the moment tennis changes forever? Is this the tipping point where the celebrity finally surpasses the sport itself? This is much more than a simple match report. This is a case study on the birth of a global icon. So fasten your seatbelts. The time has come. Let's start with the logistical disaster that was the siege of Court 6. We need to begin with the physical reality of Monday's events. Melbourne Park is an enormous complex, so you have to understand the specific geography of a Grand Slam to get why this matters. To appreciate the severity of this shock, realize that the coliseums where the champions play are Rod Laver Arena, John Cain Arena, and Margaret Court Arena. These are the show courts. They can accommodate thousands of spectators. They feature security briefings, and they require ticketed seating. Then you have Court 6, Court 8, and Court 13, the outside courts. These are the working-class battlegrounds of the tournament. This is where the grinders compete. Usually the crowd is so sparse you can hear the squeak of sneakers on the rubber surface. Tournament directors schedule matches here using a predictive algorithm that assumes low attendance, which is exactly where they went wrong. If you are sitting on the throne of the tennis world, you walk out onto the pristine surface of Rod Laver Arena. But if you are an unseeded prospect like Alexandra Eala, you are relegated to the outer grounds, specifically Court 6. That is standard scheduling protocol for the organizers. However, the scheduling algorithm failed to account for one massive unpredictable variable: the sheer power of the Filipino diaspora. You have to understand that the Philippines is far more than just a sovereign nation on a map. It is a sprawling global network of passionate supporters that dominates the sporting landscape. In the city of Melbourne alone, there are roughly 60,000 residents born in the Philippines, and on Monday, it felt as if every single one of them boarded a tram destined for Melbourne Park. Witnesses on the ground describe the scene not just as busy, but as claustrophobic and absolutely electrifying. The pedestrian walkways surrounding Court 6 were gridlocked with humanity long before Eala even unzipped her bag to retrieve a racket. Security personnel were forced to step in not to manage the match itself, but to manage the crushing throng of spectators trying to glimpse a 20-year-old hitting a yellow ball. This is the tennis equivalent of the Manny Pacquiao phenomenon. For decades, whenever Pacquiao stepped into the boxing ring, the streets of Manila would fall silent, and the national crime rate would virtually drop to zero as the country paused to watch. With Alexandra Eala, we are beginning to witness the early stages of that exact same cultural singularity re-emerging in 2026. For these legions of fans, she is not merely an athlete chasing a ranking. She is a living embodiment of their national identity. When she walked out, the stands were a sea of red, blue, and yellow flags. The volume was so intense that there was a legitimate concern the roaring chants would drown out the matches being played on the adjacent courts. And this brings us to the most controversial talking point of the tournament so far. Since this intensity has a flip side, we need to have a frank discussion about the battle between traditional etiquette and raw passion. Historically, tennis is a library-quiet pursuit. It is a sport built on polite golf clap applause. The rule is simple: when a player strikes a winner, you clap respectfully. Conversely, silence is mandatory during play. And perhaps the biggest unwritten rule of all is that you never ever cheer when your opponent faults on a serve or makes an error. However, the crowd at Court 6 took the rulebook and threw it into the Yarra River. According to ground reports and outraged tennis purists on social media, the atmosphere turned hostile when Alycia Parks committed a double fault. The crowd didn't just murmur, they cheered. There were thunderous roars of approval as she buried an unforced error into the net. To her immense credit, Alycia Parks later admitted in the press conference that the environment was incredibly difficult to navigate. Calling it difficult is a massive diplomatic understatement. She was ostensibly playing in a neutral country, yet it felt like a hostile away game in a partisan stadium. She was competing not only against Eala, but against a solid wall of noise that actively wanted her to fail. Naturally, this has ignited a firestorm of debate within the tennis community this week. The traditionalists are up in arms, arguing that this behavior violates the sacred sanctity of the sport and shows a profound lack of respect for the competitors. On the other side of the coin, the modernists are pointing at the screen and saying, "Look at that energy. Look at that raw fervor." They argue that tennis is desperate for this kind of engagement. If the sport wants to survive in this fast-paced era and compete for eyeballs against the NBA or the Premier League, it cannot ignore this level of passion, raw as it may be. It felt alive even if it didn't strictly adhere to sportsmanship guidelines. Contrast that with the half-asleep applause we often see during early matches on center court. The Eala match mattered. The stakes felt significantly higher than what was displayed on the scoreboard. Now let's break down the three key phases: the bagel, the collapse, and the context. The scoreline tells a fascinating story of pressure, nerves, and veteran experience. So let's analyze the actual tennis, because the way this match started looked like it was going to be the headline of the year. Eala came out of the gate firing on all cylinders. She absolutely dismantled her opponent in the first set, taking it 6-0. In the realm of professional tennis, handing a bagel a 6-love set to a top 100 player like Alycia Parks is a massive statement. It implies total and utter domination. Eala was reading Parks's massive serve like a book. She was feeding off the electric energy of the crowd, redirecting the ball from corner to corner with surgical precision. 45 minutes into the contest, the hype train seemed to be fully justified and moving at full speed. It looked for all the world like she would cruise into the second round. But tennis is a brutal mental battlefield. Alycia Parks is not a rookie. She has been here before. Parks composed herself, took a breath, and started unleashing one of the biggest serves on the tour. Suddenly, in the second set, the momentum shifted violently. Parks stopped missing. She began hitting her spots with authority, and all of a sudden, Eala found herself under a completely different kind of pressure. When you are the underdog, you play with freedom. But when the crowd is screaming your name and you are up 6-love, suddenly you have something to lose. You start to tighten up. The arm gets stiff. Unforced errors that weren't there in the first set begin to creep in. The first serve percentage drops off a cliff. Eala lost the second set 6-3 and eventually fell 6-2 in the decider. She didn't get the win. But here is the critical realization: the final score was irrelevant. Usually when a hyped prospect gets a ton of attention and then loses in the first round, the bandwagon derailment is instantaneous. Sponsors pull back. The media cycle moves on to the next big thing. But in this case, the narrative seems to have been fueled by Eala's loss rather than extinguished. Why? Because the story isn't about her dominance just yet, it is about her arrival. Her ability to completely outplay a well-established American pro for an entire set proved her potential is real. The subsequent collapse simply proved that she is still young and has room to grow mentally. But the most important takeaway is that the crowd never left. They stayed until the very last point. Even as she was losing, they were chanting her name at the top of their lungs. That is the difference between a competent player and a franchise icon. A good player has fans when they are winning. An icon has an army that stands by them even when they bleed. Let's look at the new currency of fame by revisiting that YouTube metric. 171,000 views versus 8,000. Remember, Aryna Sabalenka is a two-time Australian Open champion. Sabalenka is a terrifyingly skilled tennis player. She is loud, funny, charismatic, and dominates the court. On paper, she should be the undisputed main attraction. So why is she losing the war for attention against the world number 49? It ultimately boils down to a hero gap and simple demographics. Belarus, the home of Sabalenka, has a population of roughly 9 million people. We are talking about a massive population of 115 million people currently living in the Philippines. However, this story goes far beyond simple census statistics or demographics. It is fundamentally about a deep psychological phenomenon known as the national hero void. Sports enthusiasts in powerhouse nations like the United States, Spain, or France are absolutely pampered with options. They have an endless buffet of icons ranging from Carlos Alcaraz and Rafael Nadal to legends like LeBron James and Simone Biles. If one of their superstars takes a loss, those fans can simply flip the channel to the next winner. But in the Philippines, a genuine international sporting hero is a rare, finite, and incredibly valuable resource. For 2 solid decades, the legendary Manny Pacquiao shouldered that colossal burden and served as that singular resource for his people. Every time he stepped into the ring, his gloves were packed with every last ounce of hope for the entire country. Now that the Pac-Man has retired, that massive collective energy is frantically searching for a new vessel to inhabit. In the world of basketball, that hope tried desperately to latch onto Kai Sato. But as of right now, the ultimate NBA dream remains unfulfilled and out of reach. That intense energy has now firmly settled on Alexandra Eala. She is the chosen vessel. Make no mistake, when Filipinos tune in to watch her, they are not merely watching a tennis match. They are witnessing global representation on a major screen that, historically speaking, has typically ignored their presence entirely. They are watching their flag fly high on the world stage. This is precisely why she is currently generating more buzz and is more well-known in Australia than champions like Aryna Sabalenka. While Sabalenka plays to defend her team and her own legacy, Eala is battling for the hearts of 115 million people who are yearning to be acknowledged globally. For the WTA, the Women's Tennis Association, this situation represents an absolute marketing goldmine. Ever since Serena Williams retired, the WTA has struggled to identify the next electrifying rivalry to captivate the public. The current dominant Big Three, Iga Swiatek, Aryna Sabalenka, and Elena Rybakina, all hail from Eastern Europe. While talented, they generally appeal to the same demographic slice. Alexandra Eala, however, cracks open the entire Southeast Asian market, extending her reach far beyond just the Philippine archipelago. Major corporate sponsors like Nike, Adidas, and Rolex are undoubtedly looking at those YouTube analytics and drooling over the potential market penetration. To be honest, these brands do not give a damn if she lost in the first round. What matters to them is that 170,000 people clicked on her video. The burning question is what happens next. So, what is the strategic play here? The breaking news cycle has just confirmed Eala's rapid departure from Melbourne following the tournament. She is currently on a flight back to Manila to headline the inaugural WTA 125 Philippine Women's Open. This is a brilliant strategic maneuver by her management. Instead of stewing over a devastating loss in Australia, she is returning home to be embraced and welcomed as a conquering hero in Manila. She is the sole reason this competition even exists. Just consider that the WTA essentially approved a new tournament in the Philippines specifically to capitalize on the massive Alexandra Eala craze. On her home turf surrounded by adoration, the odds are very high that she will stack up some wins. However, while she strengthens her base and rebuilds confidence, the warning flags are fluttering. We have seen this movie before. It is reminiscent of the Anna Kournikova phenomenon. There is a danger when a player becomes a massive celebrity before they become a consistent major winner. It can easily turn into a glittering trap. The crushing strain to represent an entire country combined with endless photo shoots and media commitments can easily stifle a young player's technical growth. Alexandra Eala finds herself in a precarious situation. Although she currently possesses the game of a top 50 player, she carries the overwhelming fame and burden of a world number one. The year 2026 is absolutely crucial for her career. She must close the gap between her fame and her game. Her fan following must be as loud as her forehand. In the world of sports, we frequently define arrival as a moment of triumph. We usually say a player has arrived only when they lift their first Grand Slam trophy. Or perhaps when they finally crack the code and break into the elite top 10 rankings, we consider them to have truly arrived. We instinctively associate the idea of conquest with arrival. However, I contend that Alexandra Eala has completely reinterpreted what it means to arrive in modern sports. Today, arriving means being noticed. Arriving means having the magnetic power to make everyone stop scrolling and start watching. True arrival is the ability to transform a routine first-round defeat on a side court into the main event of the evening news. There were 128 women in the Australian Open draw, yet Alex is currently the most significant non-champion in the world, for a sport thirsty for personalities, new markets, and youth. Yes, one player will inevitably hold the trophy at the conclusion of this competition. But on that Monday night, amidst the packed, boisterous, and electrifying atmosphere of Court 6, it made absolutely no difference who was holding the trophy. What mattered was who held the crowd. The 171,000 viewers tuning into her press conference were not waiting for a scoreboard winner. They did not click for stats. They wanted to hear her voice, so they clicked. She is no longer just a tennis player. She has become a full-blown movement. She is a living symbol of representation. Indeed, statistically speaking, she is unquestionably more talked about in Australia this week than the woman who will eventually be crowned champion. The Eala age is far from over. It is already taking control of the narrative. The victories on the court will come in due time. It is likely just a matter of time until the physical awards catch up. But make no mistake, the superstardom has already arrived. The only victory that truly resonates in the landscape of 2026 is that even while losing a match, Alexandra Eala has decisively won the battle for our attention. I am your host, and this has been our in-depth special report. The world is undoubtedly focused on the girl from the Philippines, so it is more crucial than ever to keep your eyes on the ball. Good night and stay locked in.